The video you're about to watch is just a small part of a much larger story, and we discuss that entire story on our audio podcast, the Islamic History Podcast. We cover a variety of topics ranging from the lives of the four righteous caliphs to the Bosnian War to the history of Palestine. So, if you like deep dives and in-depth storytelling about the events that have shaped the Muslim world, subscribe to the audio version of the Islamic History Podcast. And by the way, it's 100% free. Look for the link in the description box. The Byzantines and the Turks. Even after retaking Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire remained very small. It was even smaller than before the Fourth Crusade. The Byzantine Empire, if it could still be called an empire, consisted of Constantinople, some parts of Thrace, a few islands in the Aegean Sea, and the northwestern parts of Anatolia. Their small empire meant the Byzantines also had a small military. For this reason, they focused on defense, utilizing fortresses and fortifications to defend their holdings. Because they were so small, the Byzantines had to minimize their losses. They began experimenting with new weapons like the crossbow. The crossbow did not take much skill and could be used with deadly efficiency even by novices. The Byzantines also began adopting some of the weapons, armor, and military tactics of the Western Europeans. Curiously, they never bothered to adopt the heavy cavalry charge the Crusaders were famous for. When larger numbers were required, the Byzantines hired mercenaries. They even used Turkish mercenaries who were excellent horse archers. And when their interests aligned, the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum even loaned troops to the Byzantines to fight against their mutual enemies. When this happened, it was not uncommon for the Turkish troops to stay with the Byzantines. There are reports of entire Turkish tribes abandoning the Seljuks and permanently joining the Byzantine Empire. Nonetheless, the Byzantine Empire was still shrinking. They seem to have lost all interest in Anatolia and focused on the European side of the Bosporus Strait. What little territory the Byzantines still held in Anatolia was populated by small landowners called Akritoi. Many of these Akritoi lived along the dangerous border where the Byzantine Empire ended and the Turkish beyliks began. With the Byzantines focused so much on Greece and the Balkans, the Akritoi were abandoned to deal with the Turks on their own. More often than not, the Akritoi had no choice but to pledge fealty to one or another of the Turkish beyliks in Anatolia. The Ottomans arrive in Europe. As mentioned earlier, the Byzantines and their various Greek factions had been hiring Turkish mercenaries for years. John Kantakouzenos, also known as John VI, hired thousands of Serbian and Turkish mercenaries in 1341. At the same time, John VI was fighting to take the Byzantine throne from his rival, John V. John VI stationed many of his Turkish mercenaries in forts along the Gallipoli Peninsula. He even allowed these mercenaries to conduct raids into Greece and Anatolia so long as they steered clear of Byzantine territory. These Turkish mercenaries were from the Aegean beylik. The Aegean Turks were fairly strong until their leader died. After that, they diminished and either merged with other beyliks or were conquered by them. Hence, when John VI found himself in trouble again in 1347, he had to find a different group of Turks to hire. This time, he turned to the Osmanli beylik, who had taken over much of the lands from the Aegean Turks. Osman had died in 1323, and his son, Orhan, was the new Osmanli Sultan. Orhan led 5,500 troops on behalf of John VI through the Dardanelles and into Thrace. There, they defeated all of John VI's enemies from the Black Sea to Constantinople, allowing him to ascend the Byzantine throne. Nonetheless, John VI continued to face challenges to his authority, and he continued to call on the Osmanli Turks for assistance. This bond between John VI and the Osmanli Turks grew very strong. John VI married his daughter to Orhan. Meanwhile, Orhan's son, Suleiman, attacked those regions in Thrace that continued to resist John's authority. When the Serbs briefly captured Thessalonica in Greece, Suleiman retook it for John VI. Emperor John VI was so grateful to the Osmanlis, he allowed Orhan's troops to garrison in his fort at Gallipoli in 1352. Now the Osmanlis were close by in case he ever needed them on short notice. The Osmanlis took full advantage of this new European home. Suleiman led raids throughout Gallipoli, not concerned in the least that he was raiding Byzantine territory. When John VI complained to Suleiman's father, Orhan apologized profusely. However, he could not return the lands his impetuous son had captured. Orhan tried to explain how Islamic law forbade him from returning land that had been taken from non-Muslims. Things continued to go bad for John VI. In 1354, a severe earthquake struck Gallipoli, destroying much of the Byzantine defensive fortifications in the region. For some reason, Suleiman interpreted this tragedy as a sign from Allah that the Osmanlis had to stay in Gallipoli. The Osmanlis consolidated their territory in Gallipoli and used it as a base to launch more raids into Europe. To Emperor John VI's horror, the Ottomans continued to raid, pushing deeper into Thrace. Before long, they had captured Cordoba, Tekkirda, Lulubergaz, and Malkara in what is now the European part of modern Turkey. Emperor John VI finally realized the danger he was in. His former Osmanli allies were steadily taking the land surrounding Constantinople. Desperate, he turned to his former enemies, the Bulgarians and the Serbs, for help against the Osmanlis. But time had run out for Emperor John VI. His rival, John V, forced him off the throne in 1354 and confined him to a monastery for the rest of his life. The new Byzantine emperor was also powerless to stop the Osmanlis. Orhan's troops surrounded Constantinople, putting it under siege and refusing to allow food to pass through. Orhan demanded Emperor John V recognize Ottoman sovereignty over the European lands they'd recently conquered. Eventually, the emperor capitulated and accepted Orhan's terms. The news of this humbling experience sent shockwaves through Europe. The idea of a Muslim force conquering European lands was frightening. Many Western Europeans called for a new crusade against the Ottomans. But after the debacle of the Fourth Crusade, not many people were interested. They put the idea of another crusade aside for the time being. Orhan's delight at his recent victories were soon cut short. His brave son, Suleiman, was killed in a riding accident in 1357. Orhan went into a deep depression from which he never recovered. He died 2 years later. In 1362, Orhan's second son, Murad, became the new Osmanli ruler. In later years, the Russians called it Osmanskaya Imperia. The Germans called it Das Osmanische Reich. In Arabic, it would be known as Ad-Dulatul Othmaniyya. And in English, the empire that grew from the Osmanli beylik would be known as the Ottoman Empire.